The story you're about to hear is one of reckoning and transformation. It comes from a man named Albert Hollow, a 45-year-old engineer from Bozeman, Montana. Albert was known for his sharp mind and meticulous work, but his heart bore a darkness he hadn't fully acknowledged, one that he was forced to confront in the most harrowing way. What he experienced after a near-fatal accident changed his life forever and brought him face to face with truths that can't be ignored. Here, in his own words, is his account. My name is Albert Hollow, and for most of my life, I thought I had things figured out. I'm an engineer by trade, someone who solves problems, builds solutions, and works with precision. Life for me was about control, logic, and results. Emotions and introspection were secondary, almost irrelevant. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith. But looking back now, I see how blind I was. I didn't realize the weight of my actions or the legacy of my words. I didn't understand how my indifference, or worse, my prejudice, could cut so deeply into the lives of others. I had no reason to think about those things. That is, until November 10th, 2024, a day that changed everything. It was a cold, dry morning in Montana, the kind that signals winter's approach. I woke up early, as always, ready to tackle another day at work. My routine was simple: coffee, a quick breakfast, and then out the door. My job often required long hours and problem solving, but I liked the predictability of it. Everything had its place, and I took pride in making things function efficiently. That morning, I had planned to check on a personal project I'd been working on in my workshop before heading to the office. The tools were laid out just as I'd left them, the blueprint pinned neatly to the corkboard. It was my sanctuary, a place where I felt completely in control. But as I was setting up, I heard a commotion outside near the barn, where I kept a few animals as a hobby. I grabbed my coat and headed out, not thinking much of it. The air was biting cold, my breath visible in the dim morning light. When I reached the barn, I saw one of the bulls pacing restlessly, clearly agitated. This particular animal had always been difficult, but I wasn't concerned. I'd handled situations like this before. As I approached, the bull suddenly lunged. I had no time to react. Before I knew it, I felt an immense force slam into my chest. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and I crumpled to the ground. My vision blurred, and a searing pain radiated through my body. I tried to get up, but my limbs wouldn't respond. The world around me faded to black, and an overwhelming silence took hold. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in my barn or a hospital. I wasn't anywhere that made sense. I was surrounded by an endless, oppressive darkness. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was a suffocating void that pressed against me from all sides. There was no sound, no sensation, only the weight of that infinite blackness. Time felt meaningless. I couldn't tell if I had been there for seconds or centuries. Then, the silence shattered. In the distance, I heard screams, low and faint at first, like whispers carried on the wind, but they grew louder, more intense, until they surrounded me. The voices were chaotic, filled with anguish and fury. I couldn't make out their words, but I could feel their pain, their rage. It was as though the screams were aimed directly at me. Suddenly, flames erupted in front of me, tearing through the darkness. They started small, flickering like candles, but quickly grew into a roaring inferno. The heat was unbearable, but what terrified me more were the shapes within the flames. At first, they were indistinct, writhing shadows that moved unnaturally. But as I watched, they became clearer, their forms grotesque and twisted. Their faces resembled humans, yet their expressions were void of emotion, their eyes hollow, their mouths frozen in eternal screams. One of them moved closer, and I saw its hands charred, skeletal remains blackened like coal. Its gaze locked onto mine, and though it didn't speak, I understood its message as clearly as if it had shouted, "You belong here." The words echoed in my mind, reverberating until they crushed me. The figures multiplied, their distorted faces reflecting something terrifyingly familiar. Then, one stepped forward, and its features morphed into a mirror image of my own. It was as if I were staring into a warped version of myself, stripped of all pretense and facade. I realized then that this place wasn't just some abstract nightmare, it was a reckoning. The flames, the screams, the grotesque figures, they were all tied to me, to my life, to my choices. The darkness wasn't just around me, it was within me, exposing every corner of my soul I had tried to ignore. As the flames rose higher, I heard a whisper that grew into a deafening roar. Your heart was dark. The words pierced through me, leaving no room for denial or defense. And in that moment, I understood this wasn't just a place. It was me. It was everything I had done, everything I had failed to confront. I wanted to run, to escape, but there was no way out. The chains that bound me weren't visible, but I felt them cold, heavy, and unrelenting. This was only the beginning, and I was about to face truths I had spent my entire life avoiding. The darkness pressed against me, suffocating and relentless. I tried to move, but it was as if the weight of everything I had ever ignored, justified, or dismissed was bearing down on me. The flames roared higher, casting flickering shadows on the grotesque figures surrounding me. Their faces, once indistinct, now became horrifyingly familiar. One of them stepped forward, its hollow eyes fixed on mine, its features twisted and morphed until it became me, my own face, distorted and void of life. It leaned closer, and though it didn't speak aloud, its message reverberated in my mind. Your heart was dark. I wanted to deny it, to argue that I wasn't that man, but the truth was undeniable. The shadows around me seemed to sense my resistance, and they moved closer, their skeletal hands clawing at the air as if they could pull the truth from me. Suddenly, the ground beneath me split open, revealing a massive chasm filled with a blinding light. But this light wasn't comforting or warm, it was harsh, exposing every corner of my soul. The screams of countless voices echoed from the chasm, and within the light, I saw flashes of scenes, memories I had buried long ago. The first memory was from my childhood. I was standing with a group of kids in my old neighborhood, watching as a new family moved into the house across the street. They looked different from us, different skin tone, different language, different everything. I had joined the others in making fun of them, playing cruel tricks to make them feel unwelcome. At the time, it had seemed harmless, just childish pranks. But now, as I watched the scene unfold, I felt their pain as if it were my own. The father's weary eyes, the mother's quiet fear, the children's forced smiles, they all bore the weight of rejection. My laughter, which had once brought me a sense of superiority, now echoed back at me as a cruel and hollow sound. The figure beside me whispered, "Did you see their pain? Alburn, did you care?" The memory dissolved, replaced by another. I was in high school, sitting in the back of a classroom. A classmate, Marcus, had stood up to answer a question, and I had made a joke at his expense. The words came easily, thoughtlessly, and the room had erupted in laughter. I'd felt a rush of power, of control, as Marcus sat down, his face flushed with humiliation. Now, in this place, I saw the moment from a different perspective. I saw Marcus's face, his eyes glistening with tears he refused to let fall. I felt the sting of my words, not as the one who spoke them, but as the one who bore their weight. The figure beside me spoke again, its tone cold and firm. "Your words struck like stones. What have you brought into this world?" Each memory hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just recollections, they were relived experiences. But from the perspective of those I had hurt, I felt their pain, their anger, their confusion. It was unbearable, yet I couldn't look away. The flames around me surged, and chains began to appear. One by one, they wrapped around me, cold and heavy, each one representing a moment of cruelty, indifference, or selfishness. The weight was crushing, but the pain wasn't physical, it was deeper, cutting into the very fabric of who I was. Then, from the darkness, a face emerged. It was Marcus, the classmate I had mocked all those years ago. At first, his face was obscured, but as he stepped closer, it became painfully clear. His eyes, filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow, locked onto mine. His voice trembled as he spoke. Your words left me carrying a burden I should never have had to bear. Why, Alburn? Why did you make me live in a world you taught me to hate? I wanted to respond, to apologize, but no words came out. My throat felt dry, as if the very act of speaking had been stolen from me. I tried to fall to my knees in repentance, but the chains held me in place, pinning me to the ground. One of the figures in the flames stepped forward, its voice echoing through the void. There is no escape from this. Alburn, you've built your own hell. Only true repentance can break it. But repentance isn't just a feeling. Will it lead to change? A mirror-like surface appeared amidst the flames, and I was forced to look into it. What I saw wasn't the man I thought I knew. My face was darkened, my eyes hollow and lifeless. This wasn't just a reflection, it was a revelation of the hatred and selfishness I had carried within me. I wanted to turn away, but the mirror held me captive, forcing me to confront the truth of who I had become. A scream tore through the air, raw and piercing, shaking me to my core. I looked down and saw a twisted figure crawling toward me, its body writhing in agony with every movement. Flames engulfed it as it clawed at the ground, its scorched hands leaving trails of fire behind. Its hollow eyes locked onto mine, and it whispered, "Will you live like this forever?" Desperation filled me. For the first time, I truly understood the weight of my actions, the depth of my wrongs. Summoning what little strength I had, I whispered the only words that came to me, "Forgive me." At first, the words were faint, barely audible, but as I repeated them, they grew louder, stronger, until they echoed through the darkness. "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me." The chains tightened momentarily, as if resisting my plea, but then, slowly, they began to loosen. The flames around me shifted, no longer scorching but instead consuming the shadows within me. It was a fire of purification, burning away the darkness I had carried for so long. For the first time since I had arrived in that place, I felt a glimmer of hope. The figures in the flames faded, their accusations silenced. The oppressive darkness began to lift, replaced by a faint, flickering light. Though the weight of my sins still lingered, I felt something I hadn't experienced in what felt like an eternity: grace. The chains fell away one by one, clattering into the void beneath me. The oppressive darkness lifted just enough for me to catch my breath. The figures, once so vivid in their torment, faded into the flickering shadows, but the lessons they brought lingered, their voices echoing in my mind. "Your heart was dark. Your words struck like stones. Will you live like this forever?" As the last chain unraveled, the mirror before me shifted. It no longer reflected the twisted image of who I had been. Instead, it showed flashes of the life I had lived, scenes I thought I'd long forgotten. I saw my younger self again, standing with my friends in the neighborhood, mocking the family that had moved in. Their faces so human, so fragile, etched themselves into my soul. I saw their father staring out the window at us, his expression weary yet determined to protect his family. How had I never noticed the quiet courage it must have taken for him to hold his head high in the face of such hostility? The scene dissolved, replaced by the memory of Marcus in the classroom. This time, I didn't just see his face, I heard his thoughts. I felt his humiliation, his desire to disappear, and his internal question: why do they hate me when they don't even know me? The weight of his unspoken pain bore down on me, heavier than any chain I had carried. Then, the mirror showed me something new, something from my adult life. I was in the office, standing with a group of colleagues, laughing at a joke I'd made about Marcus, who had later become a coworker. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. It was just another throwaway comment, a fleeting moment meant to entertain the crowd. But now, I saw Marcus walking away, his shoulders slumped, his expression blank, but his pain unmistakable. The memory hit me like a physical blow. I had justified those moments as harmless fun, never considering the lasting scars they might leave on someone else. The mirror shifted again, this time to my interactions with others, moments of indifference, dismissal, and cruelty that I had ignored or excused. Every word, every action, every choice stood before me, a damning testament to the life I had built on selfishness and pride. The voice from the darkness returned, cold and unwavering. You've built your own hell. Albert, only true repentance can break it. Will you change? Or will you remain the man you've always been? I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the enormity of what I had seen. My chest heaved as I struggled to find the words. I see it now, I whispered, my voice trembling. I see what I've done. I've hurt so many people. I've been blind to their pain, blind to the darkness in my own heart. Forgive me, please. Forgive me. As the words left my lips, the flames around me dimmed, their heat giving way to a strange, purifying warmth. The light within the chasm grew brighter, but it no longer felt harsh or accusatory. Instead, it seemed to draw me in, offering a sense of possibility, a chance to begin again. From the light, a figure emerged. It wasn't one of the grotesque forms that had haunted me earlier. This figure was different, tall and spectral, with an ethereal glow. Its eyes burned with intensity, yet they carried a sense of compassion I hadn't expected. Albert, it said, its voice resonating through the space. Do you now see the weight of your choices? Do you understand the harm you have caused? I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Yes, I said. I see it. I feel it. I want to change. I have to change, but I don't know how. The figure stepped closer, its presence both comforting and commanding. Repentance is not just a feeling, it said. It is a choice, a commitment to turn away from the darkness and walk toward the light. You must face the consequences of your actions, seek forgiveness where it is owed, and strive to bring healing where there was harm. I swallowed hard, the weight of its words sinking in. I'll do it, I said, my voice firm despite my fear. I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to be that man. The figure nodded, and the light around it began to expand, enveloping the space. The darkness retreated, the oppressive void replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't felt in what seemed like an eternity. The chains that had bound me were gone, and for the first time, I felt free, not just from the torment of this place, but from the weight of the life I had lived. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on a cot in a small, familiar room. The ceiling above me was low, the air filled with the faint scent of antiseptic and hay. As my vision cleared, I recognized the face of the village doctor leaning over me, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. Albert, he said, his voice soft but steady. You're awake. We thought we'd lost you. You've been unconscious for days. I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in my chest reminded me of the bull's kick. The doctor placed a hand on my shoulder, urging me to stay still. You need to rest, he said. Your body's been through a lot. I nodded weakly, but my mind was elsewhere. The memories of what I had seen, what I had felt, were still vivid. The darkness, the chains, the faces of those I had hurt, and the voice that had called me to change. It was all so real, so undeniable. The doctor spoke again, but his words blurred into the background as I closed my eyes. Quietly, I whispered to myself, there must be a reason for this. I was given another chance to make things right. Even as the pain in my chest lingered, a deeper ache stirred within me, a longing to begin the journey of repentance and transformation. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't go back to the man I had been. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to take the first step. The days following my awakening were a blur of physical recovery and relentless introspection. The vivid memories of what I had experienced in that dark, fiery realm clung to me like shadows. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's face, heard the voices of the figures in the flames, and felt the weight of the chains that had bound me. But what stayed with me most was the voice that had called me to change. Repentance is not just a feeling, it is a choice. Each morning, as I lay in bed recovering, I stared at the ceiling and wrestled with the enormity of the task ahead. How could I begin to make amends for a lifetime of harm? The faces of those I had hurt, the moments I had dismissed as harmless, now felt like scars etched into my soul. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I had to start by confronting my past. On the 5th day after my accident, I mustered the strength to leave the house. My body protested with every step, the pain in my chest serving as a constant reminder of how close I had come to losing everything. But the ache was nothing compared to the urgency I felt. I needed to take the first step, and I knew exactly where to go. The small church in town had always been a place I passed without a second thought. Its stone walls and wooden doors were familiar but uninviting to the man I used to be. Faith had never been a priority for me. It was something other people relied on, not an engineer like me. But now, as I stood before the doors, I felt a pull stronger than anything I could explain. I pushed the heavy door open, and the stillness inside enveloped me. The sunlight streaming through the stained glass cast soft colors on the stone floor, and the faint scent of old wood filled the air. I walked slowly down the aisle, my footsteps echoing in the silence. When I reached the front, I knelt, my knees pressing into the cold stone. I didn't know what to say or how to pray. All I could do was bow my head and let the words come. God, I whispered, my voice breaking. I don't know if you'll hear me, but I need your help. I've made so many mistakes, hurt so many people. I don't want to be that man anymore. Please change me. Show me how to make this right. Tears streamed down my face as I sat in the stillness, waiting for anything to let me know I wasn't alone. The peace that came wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. It was subtle, a quiet assurance that I had been heard. As I left the church, my eyes caught a flyer on the bulletin board near the door. The name printed on it stopped me in my tracks: Marcus Carter Auto Repair. Below it was an address and a phone number. My heart pounded as I read it again, and a flood of memories rushed back. Marcus, the boy I had mocked, the man I had dismissed in the office, he was still here. I knew what I had to do. It was time to face him. It was time to seek forgiveness. The drive to Marcus's repair shop felt like an eternity. The countryside blurred past my window as my mind raced with every possible outcome. What if he refused to listen? What if he told me to leave? Or worse, what if he forgave me too easily, without understanding how deeply I meant my apology? My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as I wrestled with the weight of my past and the fear of the unknown. But as the repair shop came into view, a voice from deep within calmed me, reminding me of the purpose behind my journey. Repentance is not just a feeling, it is a choice. The shop was modest, with a few vehicles parked out front and a small sign that read Carter Auto Repair. Marcus was there, standing by an old pickup truck with a wrench in his hand. His cap was pulled low, but I could still see his face weathered, determined, and calm. His hands moved with the practiced ease of someone who had done this work for years. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure if I could go through with this. But then I remembered the faces of those I had wronged, the weight of the chains that had bound me in that dark place. And I knew I couldn't turn back now. I stepped out of the truck, my legs feeling heavier than they should. As I approached, Marcus looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly as recognition dawned. He froze for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Alburn Hollow," he said, his tone neutral but edged with curiosity and perhaps something deeper. He put down the wrench and wiped his hands on a rag, waiting for me to speak. "Marcus," I began, my voice shaky. "I don't even know where to start." He didn't respond immediately, his eyes studying me carefully. The silence stretched between us, thick with the unspoken history we shared. Finally, he said, "Then just say what you came here to say." I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "I came here to apologize. For everything. For the way I treated you in school, at work, for all the jokes, the dismissive comments, the times I made you feel like you didn't belong. I was wrong. Marcus, I was so wrong." His face remained stoic, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of emotion, something I couldn't quite place. "Why now?" he asked, his voice steady. "Why after all these years?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain everything I had experienced without sounding unhinged. But I owed him the truth, because I finally see it. I said, "I see the damage I caused, the pain I ignored. I didn't just hurt you, I hurt myself by becoming someone I never should have been. I need to make it right." Marcus leaned against the truck, crossing his arms as he listened. The silence that followed was unbearable. My heart pounded in my chest, each second feeling like an eternity. I had no idea what he was thinking, no way of knowing if he would accept my apology or send me away. Finally, he sighed deeply, shaking his head. "You know, Alburn, I've thought about this moment a lot," he he said. "I wondered if you'd ever realize what you did, if you'd ever feel the weight of it." His words cut deep, but I knew I deserved them. I braced myself for whatever came next. "But," he continued, his voice softening, "I also learned a long time ago that I couldn't carry that bitterness forever. It took me years to let it go, to move on. So yeah, Albert, I forgive you." The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. Tears welled up in my eyes as I whispered, "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." Marcus stepped closer, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. "Forgiveness is one thing," he said, "but what matters now is what you do next. Forgiveness is a gift, Albert, but change, that's where the real work begins." We stood there for a while, talking in a way we never had before. Marcus shared bits and pieces of his journey, the struggles he had faced, the resilience it took to keep going, and the moments when the pain almost broke him. I listened, humbled by his strength and ashamed of the part one had played in his hardship. "I've built a good life for myself," Marcus said, "but it wasn't easy. And there were times I wondered why people like you couldn't see me for who I was, not as some target for your jokes, but as a person." His words stayed with me long after I left the shop that day. As I drove home, I felt a mix of emotions: gratitude for his forgiveness, sorrow for the pain I had caused, and determination to live in a way that honored the grace I had been given. Marcus was right. Forgiveness was just the beginning. Real change would take time, effort, and humility. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I started my day the same way I had for decades: coffee. A quiet moment by the window, but everything felt different. The weight I had carried for so long was lighter, replaced by a quiet resolve to move forward. I returned to the church later that week, kneeling in the same spot where I had prayed for guidance. This time, my prayer was one of gratitude and commitment. "Lord," I said, "thank you for this second chance. Help me to honor it. Let my actions reflect the change I want to see in myself. And please, give me the strength to keep walking this path." In the weeks that followed, I began to take small but meaningful steps toward rebuilding my life. I reached out to other people I had wronged, some from decades ago, others more recent. Each conversation was humbling, a reminder of the power of words and actions to heal or harm. I also spent more time with Marcus. What had started as an apology grew into a friendship I never expected. We often met at his shop, sharing coffee and stories. His capacity to forgive became a constant source of inspiration, a living example of the grace I was striving to embody. One day, as we sat outside his shop watching the sunset, Marcus turned to me and said, "You know, Albert, I wasn't sure if I could forgive you at first, but seeing you now, seeing how much you've changed, it reminds me that people can grow, they can learn." His words filled me with hope. If Marcus could see the change in me, maybe others could too. My life as an engineer remains the same on the surface. I still work hard, solve problems, and take pride in my craft. But beneath that, everything has changed. I approach my work, my relationships, and even strangers with a newfound sense of humility and compassion. Every interaction is an opportunity to reflect the light I now strive to carry. The memories of what I saw in that dark place stay with me, not as a burden, but as a guide. They remind me of who I was, where I've been, and how far I've come. Each morning, as I pray, I recall Marcus's words and the grace he showed me. I ask God to help me live in a way that honors the second chance I've been given. Lord, I pray, let my life be a testament to your mercy and love. Let me carry light into the places I once darkened. Thank you for this new path, and please, never let me stray from it. This journey of repentance and transformation is far from over, but I walk it now with purpose and hope. The man I was is gone, and in his place is someone who strives to live with humility, kindness, and faith. The road is long, but for the first time in my life, I feel ready to walk it. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith.